Hello and welcome, Radio Zindagi listeners. You are tuned into 11:70 a.m. and this is RJ Vedika welcoming you all on yet another episode of Illuminating Mind Matters with Basant. Basant is Bay Area's South Asian network of therapists. It's a non-profit organization raising awareness and advocating for mental health issues that affects the South Asian community. We help community members with educational resources and help them connect with culturally competent mental health professionals. To contact Basant, you can email them info@basantnow.org. Their website is basantnow.org and phone number would be 510-770-6223. So this is all about Basant and what the show would roughly be about. But more clearly, you'll hear it from Shalini Dayal, our host, who is a family therapist. So over to you, Shalini.
Thank you, Vedika. Hi, welcome listeners to our next episode. And the show today is going to be focused on the quest for the perfect grade. I'm a marriage and family therapist in Fremont, as Vedika stated, and I work with kids and families from the ages of 2.5 years onwards. And with me, I have the pleasure of having two wonderful young ladies who will be having a deep discussion on this topic. So with me, I have Surabhi Kuchibutla. She's a sophomore in one of the public high schools in Fremont. Surabhi is a Fremont native, having moved here with her family when she was 5 years old. She's a senior Girl Scout, and she has earned a Girl Scout Silver Award for developing a peer-led social skills club for children with disabilities. She's a passionate piano player who has received prizes in national and international competitions. She is interested in using coding and computer science to advance equity and social justice cause. In her free time, she enjoys listening to music, hanging out with her family, and playing with her dog. Welcome, Surabhi. I also have Stephanie Dutra, who's a Mission San Jose High School alumni from the class of 2019. She's currently a sophomore studying aerospace engineering at the University of Illinois Urbana Champaign. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correct. Stephanie spends a lot of her time mentoring and tutoring students in STEM, but she's also a big proponent of the importance of humanities and studies journalism in college. Outside of academics, she loves baking, photography, working out with friends, and playing board games. So, welcome and thank you both for making time for us for our show today. And I want to open today's show with some questions for you, especially with the question of like, what are your experiences with familial and social pressures around grades from school and also in college, if that is relevant? Stephanie.
Yeah. So I would say for me personally, like in high school, I didn't really feel that I had familial pressure. Just because my family was like pretty accepting, just kind of do your best. But just growing up in a very competitive culture, I kind of built that pressure up on myself. And even though my family didn't pressure me, I still felt the pressure to be a good kid and get good grades. So I still kind of had that aspect even though no one was really putting it on me, it was just the pressure from other people in my life. And it kind of all just built up over a certain number of years. So I definitely always like felt a lot of pressure to do well. And I think when you learn that from a young age, it kind of becomes a part of how I guess you validate yourself. So kind of just like throughout like seventh grade onward, it was always like my validation about like if I was a good kid and if I was smart was all about the grades I was getting. So I put a lot of pressure on myself in order to get like the best grades possible. So like even if I got like a 97% on something, I was like, wow, I messed up something I could have done better. And kind of just like that attitude, I think is very like damaging, especially like at a young age and just having that built up over time. I just felt like a lot of pressure on academics and going off to college, being in a new environment. Like I could attend a competitive college, but it's nowhere near as competitive, I think, in terms of like how students feel about grades. So it's been really interesting to be surrounded by people who everyone still cares about their grades, but there's not as much pressure to get the perfect grade. So that's been kind of being around that and feeling like I'm in more of a learning environment versus an environment to get perfect grades has been really nice. But I definitely still have carried on that pressure to do well. and the validation I need of good grades. So it's still kind of carried over, but I would say in college it's a bit better.
Thank you for making that point, especially like you brought up like having that pressure begin from a very young age. I think a lot of people do not realize that even if there is not familial pressure, the pressure from the environment can be tremendous. And that pressure can be internalized, and often then people carry it for a long period of time. And I do want to circle back to something that you said later, Stephanie, is about how it is different from in colleges, especially in colleges which are like yours, where there's focus on other things besides just academics and stuff. And sounds like you have also done some things to create that balance. But I'm going to come back to it because that's a very important point, especially for students and the parents of students who are in high school and they're looking at colleges and they're wondering what is a good college and how do I create balance for the teenagers, and how can parents support them to find appropriate colleges for them. So thank you for bringing up that valuable point. Surabhi, so tell me a little bit about your experiences with familial and social pressures around grades.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with Stephanie, and I also feel like that over the past year, there's been a lot more discussion about mental health and the pressure on high school kids. So I'm like really glad this situation is being discussed openly so that we can all be part of the solution. So, personally, for me, I don't have any familial pressure to achieve perfect grades, but I know that a lot of students in my school do. So I know that parents only mean well, but in my experience, if there's a constant discussion only about grades and school performance, then you somewhat sort of get sick of it like after a point. And so this constant discussion in school and in the house, it eventually makes students feel bad about themselves if they get anything less than perfect. And going to like the best colleges and universities, whatever they are, starts to become sort of an obsession. And added to that, sometimes the grading policies are not always transparent. So even in the same subject, teachers have different expectations and requirements. So it feels sort of frustrating for a lot of students because I know it becomes a matter of luck at sometimes.
Thank you, Surabhi. I think you brought up some really good points as well. You brought up about how like the grading policies are different, which creates a lot of pressure, and also college expectations. And that also creates another layer of pressure on the students. And if you could both speak on your experiences, going through high school, Stephanie, and then into college, and for you, Surabhi, what are you hearing are the pressures that you're feeling, expectations you're feeling from colleges and larger society that you have to do to achieve entrance into a good college, whether it is for you or for your peers? What do you see, Stephanie?
Yeah, I think just every single year, it seems like the bar is raised for what the student has to be to get into a university. Because you can even, like, even if it's not your own experience, you just look at other students and you see students who seem like they're doing the most, and they're getting rejected from these universities because a lot of getting into college is just luck. It's not all about like you had the grades, you had the extracurriculars. But because of that, the bar just keeps getting raised. And I saw just so many students in high school just doing absolutely everything. Every single summer you have to be doing some big academic program. People are doing research. People like are doing robotics since like a young age. And like I personally never got into any of that at like a young age. And I kind of like spent my summers just like doing what I wanted to, doing like little personal projects and stuff. So I always kind of like felt a pressure that I wasn't doing nearly as much as my peers to like get into these top tier universities, I guess. So it definitely like people just think that they have to be doing everything. You can see it like anywhere on the internet. People will be like, I have a 3.97 GPA. Is that enough to get into this college? And like the sad fact is that like there isn't like a formula to get into college. Like even if you have the best GPA and you did all these extracurriculars, it doesn't really like mean anything because we don't really know what the bar is. But I don't know. I don't think it exists, but people just keep trying to raise it every year.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was very insightful, especially as the talk about the bar getting higher and higher, and we are hearing it every day. And especially recently, as the admissions have come out, admissions and rejections have come out, and the distress that people are experiencing is phenomenal, especially coupled with the distress around the pandemic. So thank you for sharing those thoughts. Surabhi, what are your experiences about the pressure on students for to achieve that best college or getting into entrance in the college? What do you hear and experience from yourself and from your peers?
Yeah, so I definitely have heard a lot in school about how it's getting harder and harder to get into colleges, and I think that really affects the mental health of a lot of students. And so then more students feel like they have to like have everything perfect. Like if they don't get all A's every single year, then they won't get in. If they don't have like a bunch of extracurriculars that they're excelling in. And it gets to the point where if students feel like they aren't busy, that they'll start to feel bad about themselves and be like, oh, I'm not doing as much as other people are doing. How am I ever going to get into this college? And it definitely affects their mental health and starts to put a lot of pressure. And you can just feel that when you like go to school and see all of the students just worrying about how their future will end up. So, yeah.
So the fear of future and the effect on mental health, since you brought it up, Surupi, I mean, are you comfortable talking a little bit about what you see and have heard from your peers and on social media about the mental health effects on this pressure, on this academic competition that our teens are experiencing?
Yeah, so there are a lot of mental health effects. I know like it's different for every student, but like it may come out in the form of their mood or like or their behaviors that they don't even notice. I know for most students they may be engaging in behaviors that they don't even know are bad and are affecting them, but they are. And it's just also like family pressures and also the fear of not being successful.
Mm-hmm.
You feel like you have to be busy or stressed all the time, and that's just very impactful. And then also social media. So there's just a lot of different outlets that affect everyone differently. And it just, yeah.
And then social media, I mean, like you're saying, there's a lot of chatter about people who are getting acceptances. And I often wonder, what about how does that impact the students who are not getting accepted into colleges of their choices, in spite of their hard work, the heartbreak that it causes, whether it's in groups or social media, and parents, often parents comparing notes with each other. And what college did your kid go into? My child is going into that college. And I was like, oh my goodness, the the stress it causes everyone is across the board. Stephanie, from your experience, what did you experience when this was happening for you?
Yeah, it was definitely really hard just to be around. Like, I mean, you see like all your friends get into all these like great colleges, and of course like you're always like really happy for people, and you don't wish that they didn't get in, but then you wonder kind of like what about yourself or your
Mm-hmm.
application made it that you didn't get in. And I think like for me that was kind of how I always like viewed it. Like I always saw like, oh yeah, these people like obviously deserve to get in. I'm really happy for them. But then you kind of reflect that back on yourself, and it's like, okay, well, what could have I done differently? Or like, was it that like 1B I got in chemistry sophomore year? Is that really like what did it? Was it not doing like research over the summer? Like things that like I didn't want to do. Like it's just like, should I have changed those things? And that kind of was definitely, I think, hard to deal with at the time when it's like senior year and you're getting those acceptances. But I feel like I can say generally for people, like once like that period of time is over and like you go off to college, like people stop worrying about that. There's like a small percentage of students who decide to like transfer to another university later on. But for the most part, like once you get to college, you don't really worry about that. And I think I also recognize like the programs I didn't get into weren't good for me, and where I ended up was good for me. But yeah, there's definitely just a lot of, pressure around just seeing everyone get in, especially on social media. And I know, like, speaking, I was on like the newspaper in high school, and every single year we did a spread about where everyone gone to college, and we did it as like a celebratory thing about where people were going. But I believe now they decided to stop doing that coverage, just because I know that like people were using it to compare themselves to every single year. So they decided to stop that because they knew they had like a big mental health impact on students.
And thank you for sharing that, Stephanie. And I'm going to come back and you can share with us how college has been different from your experience, from high school. But before we go into this question, I would like to invite Vedika to see what she has to say and if she has a question for our wonderful guests.
So Shalini, first of all, like when I'm listening to all these, my kids are way smaller, so I haven't personally been through this. But after listening to Stephanie and Surbhi's experiences, I would definitely say that everything is adding that pressure, like the social media, family, society, comparisons, and whatnot. And this is such an important topic. We should address it. So thank you so much for like all of you to bring this up and discussing it so openly. And to my listeners, let me remind you that you are listening to Illuminating Mind Matters with Basant. We come every Wednesday and we talk about the matters, the problems which are in the society and which needs to be discussed. So if you have any question, if you have any problem or anything you want us to discuss, then you can email the team of Basant info@basantnow.com. And trust me when I say it, I really mean it that these are community problems. These are community questions. So do raise them. Once more, it's info@basantnow.org. Shalini, we can get on with our very important topic.
Oh, thank you, Vedika, for reminding listeners. And, and yes, as a parent too, along with being a therapist, I've been on both sides and I've seen how difficult it can be and heart-wrenching and heartbreaking. So Stephanie, coming back to you, tell me a little bit about how has college been so different, or has it been different from your expectations? What are your experiences and learnings that you can share with especially the parents of the parents listeners, and also the teens who are in high school, that they can look forward to, or that can give them hope about when they go off to college?
Yeah. So I would say college has been like really different, I guess, in terms of academic pressure. It's really interesting to look kind of back on my high school academic experience and compare it to what I'm doing in college, because I think I can easily say the rigor of what I'm doing in college is a lot more. I have so much more work than I did in high school, but I still look back at a high school and like personally, just because I went to like a very competitive high school, I still see that high school is harder. Like there's everything in college that makes me seem like this would be harder, but I think the fact that the environment is much more of a learning environment and it's not like a toxic academic environment, it makes it just a lot easier to deal with it. Because instead of feeling like I have to get these grades, but my teachers are trying to make the exam really hard and I only have so many hours to study. I mean, I guess that it kind of transfers over to college a little bit, but I really felt like in high school, it was just, I was always just trying to get these grades and it just seemed impossible because I would put in the most effort I could and I wouldn't get them. And I think kind of going off to college and realizing like everyone's kind of learning this material mostly for the first time. Like a lot of the professors, at least I think I've been really lucky, like they really just want us to learn the material. And it's definitely like really, really hard in terms of like the difficulty, but they give you so many resources in order to succeed because they really want you to succeed. So even though like college is like really hard and really time consuming, I still see it as like less stressful than it was in high school, or at least my perception of everything is just a lot more positive than it used to be. Like I went and I took a CAD class, which is just computer aided design. And I know that when I saw people doing that in high school, it seemed so scary. And I was always scared to try new programs because people knew how to do them and I didn't. And then I went off to college and I took a class in it and it was like a brand new learning experience. Like even if people had already known how to do that, we were still all learning from scratch and I didn't feel like I was left behind at all. And just kind of having that base to build up on, like it's really helpful. Like the same thing for coding. I was scared to ever touch coding in high school. But once I came to college, like I started from the bottom and I've worked my way up, and that's something I wouldn't have had like the experience to do in high school. I would have been too scared.
That is very hopeful, Stephanie, to hear that college is such a different experience and a better experience where the professors are invested in your success, and it is a learning environment. And you used a word, a term, actually, I want to point out to our listeners, the toxic academic environment. In a lot of high schools is not necessarily there in your college and in your experience, which is wonderful. So my question to you, Surabhi, is how do you feel after hearing Stephanie's experiences in college being different from high school?
Honestly, I feel much more reassured because in high school right now, it kind of feels that we're working towards a really far away dream that just will take a lot of time to get there. And then sometimes you just get disappointed or you stop feeling motivated to push yourself because there are no like immediate reassurances that you're doing good and stuff like that. So, oh wow, just like thinking that college it will be like a lot more healthy and fun to learn. I'm really excited.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for saying that, Surabhi. I'm glad that it gives you hope as well. I have a question for both of you. What message would you like to send to the parents, the adults, of our teens? What would you like to tell them about how they can best support their teenagers? Because even though they are not pushing their teenagers, the society is, the college expectations and the bar going higher and higher is. What message would you like to send to them? Stephanie, yes.
Yeah, that's definitely a tough question. I would
Mhm.
say I think my parents were really good about kind of reminding me of what life was going to be like outside of high school, telling me that like when I get to college, it's not going to be like this. It's not going to be this hard to like be achieving these things. Like I'm going to be in an environment that's meant for learning, and it's not going to be as stressful, and I'm going to be very prepared. And I think that's definitely like I guess one thing I can look back on my high school experience and be thankful for is that it did make me very prepared for college. So even though it was really stressful, I think it definitely means that when you get to college, it's going to be a lot less stressful. But I would just say, like, in general, like to parents, like talking about grades, students are always, like Surabhi said, they're already experiencing that every single day at high school or whatever school they're in. So kind of putting extra pressure on that is unnecessary because I mean, on my end, like my parents did the opposite of that and I still had all that extra pressure. So I think just kind of being there for your kids and giving them the resources they need to feel supported is like the most important thing you can do.
Thank you. How about you, Surabhi? What would you like to tell the parents?
Honestly, I would like to tell the parents to listen to their kids because I know even though some parents don't push their kids, they're still experiencing a lot of stress. So if you just listen and be a good resource outlet and just help them get through that, then I think that would be like very helpful and just like a good reassurance that there's someone who has your back. And if there are
Yes.
who are also like urging your kids and constantly talking about grades, just maybe discuss with your kids what would be the best way for them
Hmm.
to be more to like motivate them more because I know each kid is different and they each have their own way of
And
getting.
Surabhi, what would you say to the teens? What could you say? What message would you like to send to the teens?
To the teens, I would tell them that success is just not one thing. You need to define it for yourself and that it's different for everyone. And so just don't compare yourself and make sure that you enjoy the ride because that's really what's important.
Thank you. What about you, Stephanie? What would you like to tell the teens?
I think one thing is that one thing I can look back at my high school experience and be proud of is I did the things that I wanted to do and that made me happy and that I felt like I can look back and I didn't do things that like other people just told me to do just because it would look good on college applications. So if you're participating in activities that you enjoy, that you feel like are enriching your experience in the way you want them to, that's the most important thing, not these standards that other people are setting.
Thank you. Thank you both for joining us and for sharing your thoughts and being so candid and honest about your experiences and your perspectives through high school and college. I'm going to turn over to Vedika, and just also as a reminder, tell our listeners that the next couple of segments of our show are going to deal with listening to some pediatricians. We'll be interviewing a pediatrician around the mental health aspect for kids and teens, because they are usually the first line. And also we have another one coming up about understanding the process of therapy. Basically, what is therapy? So with that, thank you both for your time. You are wonderful, articulate, and such great young ladies. And we are very, very honored to have had you. Vedika.
Thank you, Shalini. Thank you, Stephanie and Surabhi, for sharing your experiences and educating us on how important it is not to stress our kids. So, listeners, if you have suggestions or if you have any ideas what should be discussed on the shows, you're more than welcome to write us on info@basantnow.org. Or if you would like to contact Basant team, the website would be basantnow.org. Phone number would be 510-770-6223. And we will be back next Wednesday, 12:30 to 1 p.m. with another important topic for our community. Till then, this is Ajay Vedika signing off. Ji Aja.